You're very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf podcast. I'm your host, Shane Darby. Many years ago, I worked in Belfast for a company called Following the Fairways. The company had been initially set up as a membership subscription program by Johnny Packham in 1995. By the time I was employed as Director of Golf Affairs, the company was also involved in property sales for Lochern Golf Resort, which to this day is home to the only Nick Faldo signature design golf course on the island of Ireland. Nick Edmund was MD of Faldo Design during my tenure in Belfast, and was a regular caller to chat with the aforementioned Mr. JBS Packham. I never had the pleasure of an introduction during my stint in Belfast. However, that would all change in 2022 when I welcomed Nick to my home course of Royal Dublin as he undertook a 6-course flag flying exercise on the east coast of Ireland on behalf of his Global Golf for Cancer programme. Nick joins us today to explore his early days in golf, how it ultimately sunk its claws into him, how a legal career pivoted towards golf and travel writing, onwards to managing Nick Faldo's course design business, with the final chapter of his story to date being his efforts to increase and develop cancer awareness through his Global Golf for Cancer programme. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, he's a 4-time cancer diagnosis survivor. I'm very grateful to Nick for his time today. He's an inspiration, showing what a positive attitude and sunny disposition can achieve. I hope you enjoy the chat. Thanks for tuning in. Nick Edmund, you're very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf podcast. I'm very grateful that you've afforded me some time for a chat in the middle of what sounds like a very busy period for you. You've been doing a bit of travelling since we met in Royal Dublin a few months ago, including a little trip to the wilds of the Norwegian Arctic Circle. What delights did you encounter at Lofoten?
Lofoten in the Arctic Circle, indeed. I guess we'll come on to the reason why I wanted to be at Lofoten. There were a couple of reasons, but what did I experience? One of the most spectacular golf courses on the planet, and spectacular is probably an overused word, but I would put it in my top 3 of most visually stunning golf experiences. If golf for you is about, manicured fairways and golf buggies, that kind of golf, it's not for you. But if you want 18 great golf holes in the most extraordinary surroundings and the unique experience, I suppose, of playing a great golf course at 3 o'clock in the morning, as I did, being there in June, it's one of those, again, bit of a cliched expression, bucket list courses, but it was probably just about top of my list. And so to go there was fantastic. And then that was nearly a week and a half ago. And I came back and I went from Norway to the Netherlands, where I was visiting 4 of the finest golf courses in that country and indeed in Europe. Again, we'll come on to the reason that's why it was 4 golf courses, but I did visit Noordwijk, Den Haag, or The Hague, and Kennemer along the coast, which are, they're classic links courses. I felt I could have been in Scotland or the west coast of Ireland. But I also visited a club called De Pan. It's got a longer Dutch name, which I won't even try, but it's Utrecht, De Pan, and it's fabulous golf course. It's a heathland course. For a while again, I could have been at Sunningdale or Swinley Forest to some extent, but also I have to say I found it a unique heathland type golf course in the way that the fairways were very much like incredibly tumbling fairways, as if I were on a links course. Machrihanish springs to mind. I mean, maybe not such as contoured as some of the fairways at Machrihanish, but let's pick Royal St George's in terms of undulating duneland terrain. And at times, on the fairways, I felt I could have been at somewhere like Royal St George's, that with the surroundings of a Sunningdale. So a very special golf course. And as I say, great to visit 4 courses in the Netherlands so soon after visiting the most northerly great course in the world.
It's a tough life you lead. It really is a tough life. Maybe we got into the meat of things just a little bit too soon there. So for those that don't recognise the name Nick Edmund, perhaps you can give us some broad brushstrokes of an introduction to Nick Edmund, former criminal barrister, author, marketeer, former MD of Nick Faldo Golf Design, and most importantly, 4-time cancer survivor, serial fundraiser, cancer awareness advocate, flyer of flags on fourth holes, and general all-round inspirational good egg.
Well, that's a very interesting summary. Yes, I mean, I feel I've been very fortunate, first of all, let's say that. Despite having had cancer 4 times, I've had an incredibly fortunate life in that golf and travel have been my 2 major passions. And I did get in working in those environments very early on. As you alluded to, I did initially start off life in law. I qualified as a barrister back in 1984. That's a long time ago now, isn't it? The only area of law I really wanted to practice was criminal law, but I got seduced into golf quite early on in a legal career. And I often say that I switched from the bar to the 19th hole, because the way it happened was a good friend who had published a book at a fairly young age called Travelling the Turf, which was a guide to horse racing all around Great Britain, from Ayr to, I can't think of a race course beginning with Z, but Wetherby will do. It was all about how to visit these great race courses, but also a bit of the history, and perhaps importantly, where to stay nearby and what to do nearby. It was a wonderful coffee table guide that had fantastic illustrations, artwork illustrations, and that book, in fact, did about 17 editions. Anyway, the early success of that book led the author or publisher and author, to approach me, who we'd been to college together in Bristol. He approached me and said, would I like to write a golf book that he wanted to produce along similar lines? So a where to play, where to stay guide if you like to golf. And that book was called Following the Fairways. And that book did 13 or 14 editions. So that was my introduction to golf. And Following the Fairways was about the great golf courses of Britain and Ireland. And I had visited a number of those, but that book caused me to visit obviously a lot more, and gave me a good knowledge of golf throughout Great Britain and Ireland. And that led on to that golf writing doing that book led on to me writing for Links magazine, based in America, specifically on classic courses of Great Britain and Ireland. But it also led me into a golf writing career, which included writing and or editing 27 golf books, specifically about golf courses. But I also did golf yearbooks, and gave me a very broad knowledge of golf around the world, should we say. That led into another career, managing Faldo Design. I met Nick Faldo through the golf writing, and I guess we'll explore that a little bit more later on. But the golf writing did lead to, and my knowledge of golf courses, I suppose, and maybe a bit of legal background thrown in, led to me being involved at the start of Faldo Design. And I ran that business for 15 years exactly. And at the end of that, when I decided in my early 50s that I wanted to do one more thing in golf, but I wasn't sure where it was, that led me up a mountain, literally. I found myself in the Himalayas, walking to raise funds for Macmillan Cancer Support, which is a wonderful UK cancer charity, I should point out. I had no particular connections with cancer at the time, but that led on to me founding a cancer foundation involving golf. To get a long story short, I wanted to link golf with cancer using my golf contacts. And what emerged was Global Golf for Cancer. There was a 2-year pause at the beginning because I hadn't had cancer, and I wasn't sure that I was a credible campaigner, if you want to put it that way. And then, lo and behold, I wake up one morning with cancer. As I think I've said, or as you said, I've had cancer 4 times now. That has been during the development of the Global Golf for Cancer campaign. So how my life has gone from law to golf to golf course design, golf writing, and then to a campaign about involving getting the golf community supporting cancer fighters is strange, but life can be strange.
Yeah, look, I think it's probably useful maybe to deal with one Mr. Edmund's life chronologically. You did tell me not to call you Mr. Edmund, but so apologies on that score. You were born and raised, I believe, in Exeter in Devon, in the southwest of England. None of your family played golf. I'm interested to know how you were first introduced to the game.
Quite right. None of my family did and still don't play golf. A couple of my sons play a little golf, but no, I was brought up in Exeter, not particularly known for its golf. And at the age of 11, a friend couldn't join my group of friends for a game of football because he was playing pitch and putt with his parents. And we thought, what on earth is that? Anyway, he said, look, you really, really should come along. It's fun. So I went to a pitch and putt golf course in Exeter at the age of 11, swung at a ball for the first time and, of course, missed it the second time, I think. But at the end of 18 holes of pitch and putt, I was hooked. And I mean, literally, I wanted to go back the very next day. And ever since then, I've been fascinated by golf. I didn't join a golf club, I guess, until I was about 13 or 14. But that until I suppose I went to university and got involved in other things. Golf was, through my teens, golf was absolutely my passion. So that's how I got into it, by chance.
I understand that you may have been roughly 16 in 1976. So please forgive me if my maths are
I was 15,
gone a bit
but you're
awry
right.
there.
I was born in 1960, 15. So yeah.
Okay, not too far away then. So,
yeah.
Obviously, the Open Championship in 1976 was held in Birkdale. And this may have been the event that pushed you completely over the edge into that marvellous mania that Alistair Cook wrote so eloquently about. The 76 Open, of course, was won by Johnny Miller, with a 19-year-old Severiano Ballesteros finishing in second. I'm not sure if you were on site on the final day. Obviously, on that fateful day, Sevi would hit a little runner, feathered up to about 2 feet through a gap between the greenside bunkers on 18. Were you there? And if so, what do you recall from that particular scene?
I was there, Shane, Mr. Darby, if you like. No, I was there, Shane. I'm not particularly tall now, and as a 15-year-old who hadn't yet had a growth spurt, I was there, but I didn't see a lot because the crowds were massive. I was fortunate to be in that huge crowd surrounding the 18th green when Sevi hit his famous little low pitch and run between the bunkers. I certainly saw bits of it, but what I remember is the atmosphere was just extraordinary, and quite clearly Sevi had captivated that crowd with his daring do form of golf, his charisma. Even at 19, he was incredibly charismatic. And I had gone to that Open, which was my first Open, as a 15-year-old cheering on for Jack Nicklaus because he was my golfing hero at the time. And I suspect that since that day in July 1976, Sevi has always been my golfing hero. So yes, it did. It certainly is a landmark memory in my golfing life.
Why do you think maybe that it is that the Irish and the UK golf fans adopted the son of Pedrena as one of their own?
I used the word charisma just now. I mean, to describe Sevi. Charisma is a very hard word to define because I think it is about uniqueness. It's about being incredibly special. If I said in my lifetime the most charismatic footballer, and this is showing my age, but George Best without any question. I think it certainly contributed to the fact my eldest son is called George. He had an extraordinary charisma. Of course, he was a brilliant footballer, but he was just such a unique individual, as is Sevi. Sevi has this personality that is, it just captivates people. And of course it helps if you're dashingly good looking as Sevi was, as George Best was. That's part of the charisma. He was just adored by everyone, everything. But I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. He had a unique talent that is made him a one of a kind. I don't think, a bit like Elvis, it's just, you've only got to mention the name Sevi and it just speaks volumes. I'm
reminded just to recall one of the tribute shows that was on for Sevi after he passed away, and the great former sports presenter in the UK, Desmond Lynam, was sort of asked, what are your recollections of Sevi? And he sort of said, well, first of all, I'd like to look like Sevi. Second of all, I'd like to play golf like Sevi. Yeah. Third of all, I'd like to speak English the way Sevi speaks English. Yes. And finally, I'd like to speak Spanish the way Sevi speaks Spanish. Yeah. So that kind of encapsulates
it
the whole
does.
thing.
It does, absolutely. And I regard myself as incredibly fortunate to now have a close relationship with his family, and quite recently worked on a book with my great friend, the photographer David Cannon, all about Seve's life. So yeah, I feel fortunate in that regard. Sevi was incredibly special.
Excellent. Well, obviously he played, a not an insignificant part in terms of, get golf's claws hooked into you, I suppose. If maybe we look at your initial career in the legal sphere, obviously you'd go on to attend a university in Bristol. Undoubtedly the best preparation for a career in golf writing, destination marketing and golf course construction. Your initial legal career would see you move to London and furthering your career as a criminal barrister, as you said. I'm interested to know whether your legal studies led you in the direction of golf or just away from practicing law.
My legal studies, although crime was the only area of law I did practice and only area of law I ever wanted to practice, I particularly started a career in criminal prosecution. But it was at the time when the Crown Prosecution Service was set up in the UK, and that caused a lot of work, to be taken from young aspiring criminal barristers to effectively the civil service, the Crown Prosecution Service. I don't intend to denigrate it by saying that, but I didn't effectively want to become a Crown prosecutor working for the government as opposed to an individual practicing. That career was still possible, but as I say, early on it was very difficult. And when somebody offered me the opportunity to write a book about golf, I thought initially I'll just put my legal career on the back burner for a year. During that year, I then get married. And again, having a regular income was fairly important. I also married a lawyer and still am married to that same lawyer. So law has continued in my life. But my passion for golf, I suppose, I use the word, was seduced into writing this golf book. And I wrote it, and the book did go very well. And a second edition followed. And fairly soon I was invited to write other pieces for other publications, and I thought, I guess law had gone on the back burner, and I can assure you that 35 years later, whatever it is, it stayed on the back burner. But it's played a part of my life. I mean, managing Faldo Design, I was responsible for negotiating the contract. So the fact that I was a barrister, I think, helped. I think clients probably didn't want to pull a fast one on Faldo Design because they were dealing with a barrister or a lawyer, albeit they didn't know that I didn't have a huge amount of experience. But I think being a barrister and qualifying as a barrister was something I certainly don't regret. And even though I rarely sort of wish I'd been a successful lawyer, my wife has been a successful lawyer, so I've lived that life indirectly anyway. And I've been fortunate, though, to live a life in my passion, my twin passions of golf and travel. That has been what my careers have been about.
Yeah, maybe if we take a look at Following the Fairways.
Sure.
And we must, I guess the precursor to this particular section, we must of course remember that we're speaking about a pre-internet age where gems such as Cruden Bay, Neffernan District, the Machrihanish, Saunton, Sillerton Solway were most likely unknown unknowns. I'm really imagining Following the Fairways series to be a precursor to Instagram, Twitter and other social feeds, particularly in terms of important information such as places to stay, perhaps even recommendations with regard to having a drink or a bite to eat. Mm-hmm. You've obviously been involved in terms of writing or editing 27 books in total, as you said, 13 of which were obviously the annual iterations of Following the Fairways, first published in 1987. What can you tell us about Following the Fairways series of books, and what can you tell us about, what you're the most proud of in relation to the series of 13 books?
Well, I'll just start with that last point. I think probably most proud of the fact that I did write and edit a golf book at the age of 26, 27. I suppose when I see a lot of 26, 27-year-olds now, I think, gosh, I'm surprised that I was able to write that book. Initially, it included 50 essays on 50 of the greatest courses in the British Isles. I don't think I wrote 50 essays during the whole of my time at school and university. So it was I suppose, a fairly daunting task, albeit a very pleasurable one, learning about these golf courses. But yeah, I'm proud of the fact that 13 editions were published. So it was a successful book. And it introduced me to so many wonderful golf courses in Great Britain and Ireland, which became my specialty, if you like. Yeah, those things I'm most proud of. The point you made about the pre-Twitter age, etc. What killed Following the Fairways is that what made is a hard expression, isn't it? What made Following the Fairways probably it was a book for its time, and you're quite right. The internet age, and I would actually particularly highlight websites. Every golf club has a website. If it's a half decent website, it will give you a lot of the information about how to play, how much it costs to play, who to contact, the location of the course, etc. All those factual and administrative information was in Following the Fairways. What I think Following the Fairways certainly added to that, and I think we've lost. You don't write a website, and you don't have room on Twitter, and I suppose you do to some extent on Instagram, but to actually give some color, some stories to the golf courses, some detail. You know, one thing I mourn the loss of in the internet age is going into that detail. You know, the classic example being, I suppose, the stories that Herbert Warren Wind wrote about Dornoch and about Ballybunion that changed those golf courses' history forevermore. He wrote in-depth articles, I believe, in the New Yorker. These articles are probably 7 pages long and goodness knows how many words. It's not impossible to find platforms for that level of detail in writing, but they're very rare and they're very kind of in the background, I feel. Now, today, it's all about, I don't want to sound like a dinosaur here, but it is very much about sound bites.
Those sound bites are linked to our feeling of being time poor.
Yeah.
However, and obviously on the last podcast episode, I had Stephen Proctor, who is a very accomplished golf writer. I mean, I'm sure you've come across Stephen, and you know he bemoaned to a certain degree, obviously over the last sort of 15 to 20 years, there's been less and less and less of that sort of long form writing in publications, just full stop, you know. But funnily enough, I think as maybe sports departments and editorial departments become smaller, and you know the squeeze comes on the journalist. I mean, there are other avenues, as you said. I mean, you know, Substack and you know the likes of you know great writers like Alistair Tate and Jeff Shackelford and even a little bit of Richard Pennell on the Stymied blog. Like, I mean, there are, and Meg McLaren. I mean, you know, there's some great writing out there. You know, you just need to know where it is and what rock to turn up to have a look or to sample it. You know.
Yes, I suppose I'm saying it isn't mainstream anymore. But you're right. You can still find it. I don't think a book of that nature would be as popular as Following the Fairways was in its time.
Oh no, fair point. I mean, I must confess, I've seen pictures of Following the Fairways online, many pictures in fact, and it strikes me as that Following the Fairways and the illustrations contained therein are somewhat reminiscent of Harry Roundtree's efforts in Darwin's The Golf Course of the British Isles. For you, in thinking about illustrations and pictures, what role do you think good quality images play in publications?
A huge role, in short. The books, you're right. There was a hint of the Roundtree images that appeared in Darwin's seminal book, 1910, wasn't it? Wonderful book about Darwin's book about the courses of Great Britain and Ireland at the time, with I don't know how many 30 illustrations by Roundtree, watercolors. Following the Fairways did include various pieces of artwork, watercolors, oil painting, images. Didn't focus on photography. I think that was the thing that it made it one of the things that made it different. It was a book that contained golfing images that weren't photographic. Having said that, photography, two of my closest friends are golf photographers, and golf photography certainly played a huge part in the books I've been involved with subsequent to Following the Fairways and indeed Links magazine. Great golf imagery, particularly photographic, I suppose, brings golf courses to life and draws people into wanting to learn more about the golf courses. An old cliche, picture paints 1,000 words, that's certainly true of a very good picture, and it's certainly true of the images of somebody like David Cannon, who has been a friend for 30 plus years and is probably the world's preeminent golf photographer. I've been fortunate to do a number of golf books with David, and in many ways his superb photography makes the work of a golf writer easier because the pictures are helping to relay the story. But as I say, I suppose perhaps first and foremost, they absolutely draw you to wanting to know more about what's behind the image. That's one of the things that made Sevi such an icon were the iconic images that David and others took of Sevi, because his charisma came through. You're obviously hugely charismatic if you met him face to face and experienced the aura around him, but the images of what he did were again, as I say, drew you to golf.
Interesting that you mentioned David. I'm vividly recalling that image, that all action shot of Sevi, maybe post strike, all action, everything moving, white polo, navy,
How about this?
Slazenger jumper, and the green. That's the one. Yeah, the green
Right next to
trousers.
me.
That's
Yeah.
that's a Canon, isn't it?
It certainly is. He signed that picture, but you're right. It's a picture that speaks volumes, doesn't it? It not only does it say that's Sevi, but it says, "Wow, golf can be exhilarating." To me,
Yeah. I mean, Rod Murray, who's host of the Good Golf podcast in Australia, that charisma piece that you were speaking about, he says, whatever it is, Sevi had it. And he said, obviously, Greg Norman has it.
yeah.
And I guess, as you say, it's quite hard to quantify.
And in modern day, Rory has it. Rory has it.
Correct.
David will tell you he's the most exciting golfer to photograph in today's world. There's an aura around Rory and a sense of excitement about him when he plays golf. He plays golf in a fairly cavalier way, different from Sevi, but cavalier in his way, and people are drawn to that.
Oh, they are, absolutely. We'll drag you back maybe a little bit to Following the Fairways again. And I know not maybe necessarily the first volume or edition. As you got into the series, you started to create some ranking lists. Now, the more I'm exposed to golf, both home and abroad, the more I realise that subjectivity and awareness are important considerations in terms of ranking. I understand that as the years progressed with Following the Fairways, you began to establish some form of course rankings within the publication. I came across a recent-ish interview that you did with Ran Morissette on Golf Club Atlas in 2020, where you said the following: "Looking back, I think I was trying to make a bit of a statement. Namely, there's more to golf in Great Britain and Ireland than its famous old traditional golf courses. And perhaps this was exacerbated by the fact that the links list was inevitably comprised almost entirely of courses fitting that description. Maybe at the time I was also a little dazzled by the likes of Loch Lomond and Mount Juliet, and not yet having travelled quite so extensively, I believed some of the new GBI and I courses to be more exceptional than in fact they actually are. So do I now think the best 5 or 10 inland non-links courses built between 1950 and 2000 are as good as the top 5 or 10 golden age heathland courses, crafted in the early part of the last century? No. But then the latter are masterpieces." Now, how has your appreciation of world-class golf changed since your first ranking attempts through the pages of Finding the Fairways, and how have you gone about facilitating that?
Yes, I mean rankings, as you said right at the beginning, are very subjective, and certainly I didn't want. These were the Following the Fairways rankings, and as editor, they were my rankings, and I wasn't trying to say that they represented, some huge panel of experts, and that therefore they were gospel. I was trying to add a bit of color, and always trying to add another unique or different aspect to the book. So I thought, do a Following the Fairways ranking of golf courses. After all, this was a book about golf courses in Great Britain and Ireland. It was a good idea, but it does come with issues. And I'm proud of the fact that we did separate the links courses from the non-links courses, because to compare a links course, it's hard enough comparing a links course with another links course, but to compare it with a Sunningdale, for instance, I personally think is impossible. So having split out the links courses, I realised that they were full of very traditional courses, and the inland courses, I say to make a statement. I was impressed by some of the new courses that were appearing in, I guess we're talking about the 90s. You mentioned Loch Lomond, Mount Juliet. I was dazzled by them because I hadn't seen their equivalents around the world. And when I said that maybe they weren't, there wasn't meant to be a criticism of those new courses, but it was perhaps rather the opposite. Having seen so many courses around the world, I tell you, I do think Great Britain and Ireland is incredibly fortunate with how good the links courses actually are, but also how good some of those traditional inland courses, I am talking about particularly about the Heathland courses in England, how good they are. I mean, having been to places that are revered around the world for their wonderful settings, Pinehurst being an example, don't tell me the setting at Pinehurst is more beautiful than the setting at Sunningdale or West Sussex or St George's Hill, because I don't think it is. I'm not going to debate which are the better golf courses, but we're incredibly fortunate in Great Britain about the heritage we have in our golf courses. The new courses are not so special because they seem to be replicated around the world, whereas the Great Heathland courses weren't. Maybe just like our links courses, they can't be replicated around the world. The conditions just don't exist to grow, the heather and pine that happens on those Heathland courses, splashes of gorse or whatever. That there are sand courses around the world, but they don't seem to have that rich environment that we're fortunate to have in Britain and Ireland. And with links courses, just as right at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about my going to Holland and visiting those wonderful courses on the coast of the Netherlands, that there are very few of them compared to how many great links courses there are in Britain and Ireland. One of the things it's made me realise is how incredibly fortunate Great Britain and Ireland is to have the golf courses it does. Never mind the history.
No, 100%. And I guess having listened to Frank Pond speak with regard to the raw material that's on that North Sea coast in the Netherlands, when the likes of Kennemer and Noordwijk and whatnot were built, I guess back in the 30s, there was no European rules with regard to special areas of conservation and whatnot. And I guess there probably wasn't a huge demand for golf just full stop in the Netherlands. However, obviously, as the environment became more and more of an issue over there, then the ability to build additional links golf courses became less and less and less possible. So I do understand that there's a lot of dunescape there on the coast of the Netherlands, but just it'll never be built on because, for want of a better word, the environmentalists will probably have an issue with that, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a fair point, but also what you can't build on any link site now, the one thing you cannot build is history and tradition. And to me, that is important in golf. Part of the thrill of playing a Prestwick is just knowing, feeling and sensing that history. I mean, you really feel you're going to bump into old Tom Morris behind the third green at Prestwick. You can absolutely, I mean, St Andrews is an obvious example, but North Berwick, the history and tradition is some of it's indescribable. You have to feel it. All I'm saying about those links courses is, you may be able to build a links course if you got the permissions, as you say. Even if you got the permissions, you can't add in that sense of history and tradition.
You could always call it a tradition like no other and just wing it.
Yeah, just look at the honours board.
Listen, by my rudimentary mathematics, obviously you said 13 editions of Following the Fairways. You obviously published or edited 14 further books on golf. What can you tell us about some of the other publications you've been involved in, either writing or editing?
Okay, well, I have written a book about the Stroke Saver Guide to Classic Courses of Great Britain and Ireland. Is a book I'm proud of. But I did 9 books on 9 golf yearbooks. 3 of them were the Benson and Hedges Golf Yearbook, 3 were the Heineken World of Golf, and 3 were a yearbook I devised, which was the Ping Women's Golf Yearbook. And those books were essentially about the whole golfing year, the professional, but also amateur, the world golfing year in all the continents. So I was writing summaries or involving contributors to write summaries about the US tour, the Japan tour, senior golf, amateur golf, all 4 majors. I would write a piece, plus there would be a piece by a contributor about 4 majors. As I said, all the various tours. So the golfing season worldwide. And I did, having done 9 of those books, it gave me a very good broad knowledge of golf and the pro golf, but also the amateur scene, but particularly, of course, the professional game. And again, a bit of the history of it, the majors, because it did document all the rolls of honor, etc. But I suppose in that period between 1989 and 1995, which coincided with a pretty, I would say, golden age of golf. It was Seve, it was Faldo, it was Greg Norman, it was Nick Price, it was Jose Maria. Well, it was a great period of golf. That was when I was doing the 9 golf yearbooks, and I think if I were to go on mastermind, my specialist subject would be golf worldwide between 1989 and 1995. That was a period when I was doing a lot of golf writing as well. But yes, life moves on, and I'm certainly not an expert in the world of golf in 2022. But that base of knowledge has been very useful for what I'm doing now.
Looking back on your writing career thus far, what advice would you proffer to any budding John Huggins, Mike Claytons, Eamon Lynch's, or Lauren Rubinsteins?
Rubenstein, I was speaking with him yesterday, the doyen of Canadian golf.
Is he enjoying his trip up to Dornoch?
Indeed, he's at Dornoch. Yes, that's why we were in communication. Great people you've just mentioned, and certainly who am I to, or you did say budding ones, budding writers. If you're writing about golf courses, which, as I say, became my specialty, one of the things I found very useful was I didn't feel, and I think you may disagree with me on this, I didn't feel I necessarily had to play the golf course. I mean, I'm not an expert player. I was a decent golfer when I was younger, but I was never a professional golfer. So I didn't feel writing about a course I necessarily had to play it. And in fact, from my perspective, I would rather walk a course in some detail, go and stand on the back tees and go and walk on a number of the greens, but walk the course in detail, let's say over a period of 2 hours, as opposed to playing a golf course in 4 hours plus, when your mind's focused on your golf ball and where you've hit your golf ball. If you walk a course, you're looking around, you're sensing the golf course and the golf holes. To me, you learn so much more about a golf course, I think, by walking it than by playing it, if you're writing about golf. The other thing I would say is, if you're writing a story about one specific golf course, again, you want to convey what makes this course special, unique, what is its personality. And there's no substitute for a bit of hard work and research. It's not hard to do that these days, into the course's history and its traditions. Go inside the clubhouse, get a feel for the place, get a sense. Architects talk about a sense of place, and I think in golf writing, you get a sense of place, of an individual course's character, not just by playing around a golf there. That's what I'd say.
I'm not going to disagree with what you said there. And you're lucky that you mentioned that you did take a walk around. I wouldn't be a proponent of writing reviews on places that you've not seen at all,
100%,
or indeed via either Google Earth or just looking at pictures from the website. And certainly, I guess I have taken to, in addition to walking around while not playing, taken to trying to play places on a number of occasions to actually further develop that, particularly classic golf courses, that are maybe a little bit like an onion, that the more you play, the more you actually get to uncover the layers of strategy and interest that are there. But most certainly, I would completely concur with your sense of place comment, because in the same way as, and for the life of me, I think it was maybe Darwin or one of the golden age writers used to say that you could make a good guess as to where the golfer came from, dependent on how he played the game, because obviously that's sort of feeding into the character of the golf course and what sort of shots are do you need to hit it a long way off the tee? Do you need to be a really good pitcher and putter because the greens are particularly small, etc., etc. So I think in terms of to get a taste and a feel for a golf course, it's very, very important to try and soak in some of that sense of place.
Yeah, I'm certainly not advocating you don't play the course. I'm saying it depends how much time you've got as well, doesn't it? I mean, I would say that if you've got plenty of time to write about a piece about a golf course, play it and walk it. But if you've only got a couple of hours, you've only got one afternoon. I personally would spend that afternoon not playing the course. I would spend that afternoon A, walking the course, and B, using the extra time to go into the clubhouse and just soak in the atmosphere of the place, and maybe
For sure.
do a bit of homework about the surroundings of the place. And by that I mean its location, its town, its character. Because if you're writing a story as well, to be honest, I think the most interesting articles about golf are not necessarily about the bunker on the 7th or how contoured the green was on the 13th. It quite possibly will relate to the history or tradition or character of the course and or the area. They add the color. So again, I'm not saying don't write about the depth of the strategic architectural qualities of golf course. I mean, those are interesting, but they are also for a specific audience as well. And at the end of the day, you want people to be interested in what you're writing about.
No, absolutely. And I'm gonna recommend Richard Pinnell's blog again, the Substack blog, Pitchmarks. He's a delightful article, which actually a former colleague of yours, Tony Deere from Links magazine, I'm not going to say goaded him into, but certainly suggested that, how about writing an article on golf club car parks? And he did.
Wow.
And it's bloody phenomenal.
Yeah,
so it is.
I bet.
So it just goes to show what's possible. And indeed, what's possible from a writer of golf books to sashay neatly into managing director of Faldo Golf Design from 1997 to 2012. Obviously, you became Nick's managing director of the design business in 1997, a position, as I said, you would hold for the best part of 15 years. I understand that your first meeting with Nick may have been at Ballyliffin in County Donegal and may have included penning a golfing itinerary for him to facilitate viewing and experiencing some of the many Irish links courses that he had yet to visit. What can you tell us about how the opportunity with Faldo Design materialised?
So in 1992, Nick Faldo won the Open at Muirfield, his third Open. And I hadn't met him. I hadn't met his manager. But a few months after he'd won the Open and was world number one, a friend of mine who was working on a golf boat with me had read the fact that Nick wanted somebody to paint a picture of the 18th at Muirfield, and he would buy it, something like that. He was interested in a picture of Muirfield. Now, the friend in question I had, we were working on a book that would include paintings of golf courses. And he said, God, I'd love to paint a picture of Muirfield. He lived in Manchester and knew I was in the golf business to an extent, and said, could you make contact with Nick Faldo's manager? So to cut a long story short, I did that. And this was early 1993 now. I was sitting down with Nick Faldo's manager discussing golf courses, golf pictures, and I guess the subject wandered on to how many courses has Nick Faldo seen in Ireland, because at the time I was also beginning to help market Ballyliffin Golf Club in Ireland, which was a place I'd been introduced to a couple of years earlier through my golf writing, and which very few people knew about. Very few people had heard of Ballyliffin. I hadn't 2 years earlier, and I'm supposed to be writing books about golf courses in Great Britain and Ireland, but that's how unknown Ballyliffin was then. Anyway, I was trying to champion Ballyliffin. I'm sitting in front of Nick Faldo, who's manager, and I said, how many courses has he seen in Ireland? Nick Faldo's manager said, not enough. Of course, he's seen those courses where he played Irish Opens, but that was basically it. And I said, well, he needs to, yeah.
And won Irish Opens, and he won in
he won. He was
Clewis Glen, and he won Killarney, didn't he? And maybe Fota Island.
Close. He won 91, 92 at Killarney, and 93 he won at Mount Juliet in a playoff with Olaf Farbel. Yeah. See, I told you it was my era. Yeah. So anyway, I recommended that he saw some links courses in Ireland, and of course I threw in Ballyliffin as a place that a place I thought would fascinate him and would interest him. Anyway, move forward to June 93. I'm at Ballyliffin on the ground. This helicopter arrives, and having suggested to Nick Faldo's manager that he visit Ballyliffin, and I threw in a few more, including Merva, then going down to Ross's Point on to Ballybunion, which I said he has to see that. That was, Ballybunion has always blown my mind as an incredible piece of linked power that every architect should study. So anyway, he lands with, at the time, Nick was world number one by some way. He was a defending reigning Open champion. He was going for 3 Irish Opens in a row. So the week just before the Irish Open, this trip was arranged. I was on the ground. He arrived at Ballyliffin. He was initially going to play 9 holes of the old links. He ended up playing all 18 and fell in love with it. I can still remember. He stood on the first tee of the old links at Ballyliffin, and there were a few people around him because word had got out. When a helicopter appears in Ballyliffin in 1993, it was a rare occasion. Anyway, so he stood on the first tee of the old links, and I can still remember him saying, "So, do I bump and run, or do I run and bump?" That's what he sort of said, because he was looking at those extraordinary fairways that, to me, are completely unique. Ballyliffin Old Links is one of my favourite places on earth. And fortunately, Nick Faldo felt the same about it. So he played all 18. He did go to Donegal. He went to Merva. He went to Ross's Point. He went to Ballybunion. Then he went and won his 3rd Irish Open, having had the privilege of walking around all 18 with him at Ballyliffin. When I say he was world number one at the time, I probably, and that week won the Irish Open 3 in a row, and then 2 weeks later nearly should have won the Open at St George's, came second to Greg Norman, who shot 64 on the final day. But for that, Nick would have won that as well. I saw him at the absolute peak of his career, and I can still remember thinking, wow, the ball is on a piece of string. That's how much total control he had over a golf ball. And as I say, I witnessed that firsthand at Ballyliffin. How I progressed into Faldo design is that I knew on that trip was a chap called Steve Smyers, an American golf architect, whose work Nick admired. They went on to create, well, they were in fact creating Chart Hills together. So Nick already had this interest in golf architecture. He was a client of IMG at the time, and IMG would present golf design opportunities for him. It was largely a case of a signature design. Nick had and has a passion for golf architecture or golf course design, and feels he can certainly contribute certain things. So, but I think he felt, and I do believe one of the reasons he left IMG was because he wanted his own. He's a very independent chap, as you know, and a unique individual. He wanted to do things his way, and he wanted his own golf course design business. He couldn't really have his own golf course design business whilst a client of IMG. So I think one of the reasons he actually left IMG at the end of 96, beginning of 97, was because he wanted to create his own design business as well as do his own thing in other areas. So I had kept in touch with his manager. His manager knew I was a lawyer. His manager knew I had a pretty thorough background of golf courses around the world. He asked me, when Nick and he broke away from IMG, he asked me to look at a few design opportunities that Nick had. I could see that Nick was, as I say, very interested in golf architecture. I didn't know that many golf architects, but I knew enough about the subject to help him establish Faldo Design. And that was the very beginning of Faldo Design, really, in 1997. And I guess my knowledge of it, of the design business, grew in that 15-year period. Nick's knowledge of golf course design grew in that period. And I like to think I know what I can do and what I can't do. And I knew I could help on the legal side, if you like, in terms of overseeing the design contracts. I knew I could help. I had and hopefully have certain marketing skills. I knew I could represent him in negotiating, but also helping to find and negotiate the contract itself, and then oversee the contract, the new business, if you like, as well. And I used to say to people that I did everything except the design. And in the early stages, that was probably true. Obviously, we worked with I always felt it was good for Nick to be exposed to architectural thinking of various good architects. So the likes of Steve Smyers and Brian Kelly. And indeed, initially, we nearly worked on a project. We started a project with Gil Hands. So I thought it was good for Nick to be exposed to very good architects, ones that he could work with and relay his ideas. Because, as I say, Nick certainly has some unique skills that he can bring to the party. I think where you go wrong in golf architecture, if you're working with a Nick Faldo or I guess a Jack Nicklaus or a Greg Norman, don't pretend that those guys are the architect. They can certainly contribute, and they can influence the design of a golf course with their knowledge. And certainly Nick has great visualization skills. He understands strategy probably like nobody else. Don't pretend though that he's the guy overseeing the irrigation and the drainage or whatever, because that's what architects do. Nick never was a golfer. Doesn't pretend he's a golf architect. It was Nick. The business was called Faldo Design. He could certainly contribute to the design, work closely with an architect, and help create a good product. That was, I think, because we didn't go in and pretend that Nick was the architect. That helped. That certainly made me feel relaxed. I was very confident that Nick could bring certain unique skills to the party. I was also confident that we either worked with, or as the business developed, employed very good architects who Nick could work with and create a very special product. And I felt that what I could bring to it was overseeing the relationships with clients. I think client relationships is something that I'm not bad at, and add that to my general knowledge of golf, as I say, and I felt that was useful in winning business, in managing business, and I had 15 great years is all I can say about that.
You reference Nick being a unique individual. Now, I've not had the pleasure of meeting him. Undoubtedly a class act when it comes to his golfing career, possibly an acquired taste in NBC commentary duties. I'll leave that one up to the audience to determine. The term grow the game is often bandied about, sometimes erroneously, by elements in the golf space to justify certain courses of action that a player, event series, governing body or manufacturer may take from time to time. Nick Faldo certainly has done his bit to nurture the game through his Faldo series of events, facilitating high-performance amateur competition with access to amateur world ranking points around the globe. Notwithstanding any of the above, any chance you can lift the curtain and let us know a little bit of what Nick's like?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I would make, you alluded to the Faldo series, the biggest junior golf program in the world, which I don't think Nick probably gets enough credit for. And to me, he will leave two incredible legacies. I mean, first of all, UK's most successful ever golfer with 6 majors. That's a phenomenal achievement. But add to that, the world's biggest junior program, which was certainly his idea, and he's stuck with it for 25 years, 26 years now. And I've seen him. I was fortunate to be a trustee of the Faldo series during my time managing Faldo Design, and it's a remarkable creation. And as I say, I don't think he gets the credit for that. So what's he like as an individual? I think the two words that I suppose people use critically of him are that he is selfish or self-absorbed, and that he can be quite intimidating. It's strange. Those two facets of his personality, in many ways, they are his strengths. I mean, I worked with Nick for 15 years, and I think that even after 5 years, say, of working with him, he could have walked past me on a golf course during a golf tournament, and frankly, he did once. He walked straight past me. I was looking at him. It's as if he was looking through me. I didn't really exist. And part of what I'm saying is that part of his selfishness was he was so focused on what he was doing that he would it was about him for sure. And you know, people can be critical of the fact that somebody is so focused and so I don't want to play social golf with you. I just want to go out and win 6 majors and become world number one. He achieved it, and his focus, his incredible focus and selfishness, if you like, the end product was 6 major championships. And I think it's fair to say that if he was selfish, he's less selfish now, in the sense that he's not pursuing 6 major championships anymore, but he is still with a passion pursuing his television career. He's pursuing. He's still passionate, I know, about the Faldo series. So what I'm saying is, in terms of the selfishness criticism of him, I think when you break it down, it's an extraordinary level of focus. His intimidation, and people say that he's very difficult to approach. I would. He is into. If he walks in a room now, I worked with him for 15 years. If he walks in a room where I am, I'm probably more feeling intimidated than if Tiger Woods walked in, who I've never met. I worked with him for 15 years.
He's 6'3", isn't he? He's a big guy, yeah.
No, I think he's 6'4". Because he stands like a guardsman. He's still, in my opinion, 6'4", and broad and physically intimidating. And he doesn't naturally smile when he walks in a room. That's just the way people are. Some people are always smiling. Some people are rarely smiling. Nick doesn't naturally smile when he walks in a room. So he walks in a room. He's physically intimidating. He's not Mr. Bon Vivant, certainly not initially, and therefore people are intimidated by him. But I can tell you, I've been at dinner tables with Nick Faldo and 12 people, and Nick is absolutely hosting the dinner, chatting. He's a great mimic. He can be absolutely Mr. Party Animal. He is, without question, the most unique individual I've ever met. And it's difficult sometimes to feel comfortable in his company because of the two things I said. Sometimes you don't think, you think it's all about him. This is his kind of focus. And there is that intimidation factor as well, which is partly physical, partly, you're in the room with a 6-time major winner who has a reputation. So what I can say is he's an incredibly honest person, and he's a person that, he was a stickler for the golf rules. I think he's a stickler for rules in life. There's things you don't do and there's things you do, and he's very much his own man. And so it doesn't make him, the most lovable person to most people, but I just feel a privilege to, gosh, as somebody who loves golf, to have worked 15 years with Britain's greatest ever golfer. Yeah, I feel fortunate.
I think, just in summing up what you said there, perhaps the man, the intimidator, the guy who's considered selfish, without having those character traits, you wonder if that begets 6 Opens, or 6 majors, should I say?
No, I don't think so, because he would have had to make himself a different person. And one thing a comment I think that's quite important, he got, as you know, an awful lot of stick. You could say partly justified, especially if you're in the media, for his getting up at the Open Championship and singing "I Did It My Way." I'm sure you're familiar with that. He's saying, "I did it my way."
Yeah.
People said it wasn't the appropriate place. It wasn't. It was all about him. It was all of those sorts of things. But Nick had a difficult time with the press, and he did do it his way. I mean, that's what I'm saying. That he achieved what he's achieved, not just his 6 major victories, but this creation of the Faldo series, and the fact that he has then, after golf, gone on and had his other career as broadcasting and throwing the sign. He has done it his way. And when you think about his relatively humble beginnings, what he's achieved in life, I think he's in, and he wouldn't have achieved them had he not done it his way. So he just felt it was, the point he made was fair, in my opinion.
No, for sure. And if you think about the, as you say, his humble beginnings in Welwyn Garden City, and I think he only took the game up at 15 or 16. I mean, like what he accomplished in terms of fast tracking and, obviously success with his natural swing, then completely re-engineering the swing with Ledbetter and going on to essentially be a machine, and actually it's funny that you mentioned the word intimidation. I think he intimidated the crap out of Greg Norman.
Totally. I mean, that's an example of his extraordinary focus, his extraordinary dedication, his extraordinary aura, though, that he absolutely intimidated, one of the greatest golfers of all time, Greg Norman. I think, but for Nick Faldo intimidating Greg Norman would certainly have won another 2 or 3 majors. And yeah, if you can intimidate Greg Norman, you're a remarkable individual. Huh?
You certainly are, and I think Sharky probably every now and then wakes up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, thinking about thinking about Nick.
Thinking about Nick Faldo. Yeah.
He's coming to get me behind you.
Yeah. That's how it seemed. It's 1996 in particular.
No, for sure. You know, you mentioned that you were, when you worked with Nick in Faldo Design, that you were responsible for winning new business and pitching and contracts and that sort of stuff. What were the component parts to a Faldo Design pitch that you remember?
I developed the mantra, strategy and memorability. If you take strategy, I always felt it was important to, within Faldo Design, to try and reflect the strengths of Nick Faldo. Therefore, the way he played golf in particular, this incredibly strategic approach to plotting your way around a golf course and unraveling its mysteries, his attention to detail, his focus, those elements that if I were a client, I would want somebody who has this level of attention to detail, but also the dedication that goes with that, but also strong strategic skills, because the best golf courses, as we know, have lots of strategy. So I would certainly focus on Nick's personal traits that were reflected in his company in Faldo Design, because I felt they were very strong traits. But I would also emphasize the fact that, of course, we work with very good architects, and that we didn't just work with our own in-house team, who were very good, but we occasionally would partner with whether it was the best architect. For instance, in Australia, we worked on a project with Tony Cashmore, who I'd got to know very well, who was a very, very good architect and good to work with.
That was 13 Peach, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, and then you could throw in Katamaya Dunes in Cairo, where we worked with Brian Curley, brilliantly talented architect. Steve Smythes is another person I've mentioned before, who was on that helicopter going into Ballyliffin. It was partly my job to create good relationships with the architects, but these are architects, obviously, that Nick was comfortable with and in tune with. You wanted a client to believe that you're going to get great architecture. You're also going to get the value and input from Nick Faldo. And what was unique about Nick Faldo, and in terms of Nick's record and what he achieved in the game, there were few of the right age and appeal than Nick Faldo. So you put together what you felt were the strengths, and then my job was then to, if you like, to try and charm the client into feeling comfortable with Faldo Design and feeling comfortable that they would get a great golf course and that they would get input from Nick Faldo.
I listened to a Thing About Golf podcast recently where the great Rod Murray interviewed the Australian golf course designer Bob Harrison. Part of the conversation covered Greg Coffey's initial approach to Bob in exploring where they'd be interested in working on the Ard Finn project in the remote Hebridean island of Jura off the Scottish west coast. Mm-hmm. Coffey initially left a voicemail message for Harrison, which actually on first listening, Harrison thought one of his mates was taking the piss out of him. Following along the lines, it's Greg Coffey here, Bob. I was looking at the design credit for Elliston in New South Wales in the Hunter Valley, and I see it's listed as a Norman and Harrison course. I'm not much of a golf architecture geek. However, I'm pretty sure that Sharky didn't design the golf course, which must mean you did. During the course of your time with Faldo Design, the company obviously worked with course designers, as you mentioned, such as Guy Hockley, Paul Jansen and Steve Smyers. Typically, how much involvement would Nick have had on projects through their development cycles?
Guy Hockley and Paul Jansen were both initially employed by Faldo Design, so they were the in-house team, if you like. Both tremendous architects, in my opinion. Again, let's go back to what we said about, we never pretended that Nick was the architect. So, sorry, I'm trying to get what was your question again?
Sorry, just typically how much involvement would Nick have through the development cycle of projects?
No, absolutely. So again, starting with the preface that we didn't pretend that Nick was the architect. So what would Nick's input be? Well, on the design side, I don't, I'm not sure that anyone understands strategy, the golf course strategy, playing how to play a golf course more than Nick. He certainly could input strategic knowledge, discuss that with his architects. He would always tour a property before the golf course was built, but again, we didn't pretend he did the routing or routing, as the Americans like to say, of the golf course. His input really was in the once the routing had been done, his input and his strategic input, but his thoughts about hazards, his thoughts about the green complexes, and even teeing positions. He would have an input on every hole. He would certainly walk the site before construction, walk the routing that had been done, as I say, or suggested by his architect, and he might make some changes to the routing, but fundamentally he really does have strong visualization skills, and he would look at a piece of, this is, the architect would say this is hole 4, and to be honest, if I was there, I couldn't visualize hole 4. And I'd seen enough golf courses around the world, but Nick could visualize it, and Nick would certainly have, if the architect had thoughts on bunkering, maybe at a later stage, he would say, no, that's not going to work. This is where you should place the bunkers. He would often say, yeah, people don't like that kind of shot, or what intimidates somebody would be putting this hazard here or whatever. So he would have input into each individual hole. I mean, Bally, if you take, mentioning Guy Hockley just now, Guy Hockley was the architect responsible for the renovation of the old links at Ballyliffin, which we've touched on. Ballyliffin, the most amazing natural golf course I've ever seen, and I suspect Nick has ever seen. But what Ballyliffin lacked when he played there, the bunkers were awful. They're incredibly rudimentary. They weren't constructed properly, but there weren't that many, and they were in terrible places. When Nick, I remember him walking all 18 with Guy Hockley, and Guy had his notebook open, and Nick was saying, this is where and it was a collaboration, of course, but Nick was suggesting where these, because we completely rebunkered the golf course, we altered a few teeing positions, only really changed 1 or 2 holes, but it absolutely revolutionized, because the bunkers were beautifully constructed pot bunkers, and they were very well placed, following the input of Nick and the architect. So, and in my opinion, that took the Ballyliffin Old Links to another level, a level that's good enough to be hosting significant championships now. So, and Nick's input to that, as in all projects, was I believe very significant. It's just never pretend it was a contribution that it wasn't. And I think that's why you get people saying, oh, Greg Norman never went near this or whatever. I suspect he did go near it, but I think the confusion comes because, of course, the client wants it to be called Greg Norman design or Nick Faldo design. That's why he's paying a premium, because of the marketing aspects of that. But in the same way that when you go shopping in Sainsbury's, you don't meet Sir Peter Sainsbury's. What you're going into Sainsbury's and buying are goods that presumably Sainsbury's have created a certain level of product, a certain type of product, and that's when you go into a shop with a name on it. You don't have to meet the man himself or the person themselves, but it's about you're buying a certain type of product that hopefully is built to a high standard with a lot of personal input and distinctiveness. I always think, go back to that mantra, strategy and memorability. Nick Faldo used to talk a lot about the wow factor, and I know to him that meant you stand on a golf hole and you literally go wow, but that's because it has been properly conceived and created.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously an opportunity just to give Ballyliffin and the old particularly a bit of exposure. You rightly pointed out the RNA recently announced that the 2024 Amateur Championship, very excitingly, will be held in Ballyliffin Golf Club in County Donegal. For those that aren't aware, in 2022, the hole count at Ballyliffin extends to 45 holes, with two 18s in the Old and the Glass Sheedy, and of course the relatively recent Open Pollen Short Course. The formal history of Ballyliffin Golf Club stretches back to the early 1940s, albeit at a different site. From the early 1970s, Eddie Hackett, Frank Pennick, Charles Lowry and a modicum of Pat Ruddy all influenced the developmental direction of the original old course. George Waters from the USGA was a recent guest on the pod, and in his book Sand and Golf he speaks about the washboard effect that is often in evidence in sand-based sites. You alluded to it earlier on. Even though it's some 18 years since I last played the old course, I can still actually visualise the micro contours that pervade and tumble towards the seaward portion of the Ballyliffin site, acting as a counterpoint to the flatter fairway finish that characterises the shaping of the Glass Sheedy. I have a question here which you've actually preempted the answer, so we'll just sashay nicely on to Lough Erne, actually, which is another development in Ireland that Faldo Design worked on. A Fermanagh-born, Dublin-based grocer called Jim Tracy initially developed the Castlehume Golf Club just outside of Enniskillen in County Fermanagh towards the end of the 1990s. Some 10 years later, in 2009, the Lough Erne Golf Resort would open, having been lovingly created by the Faldo Design team on the banks of both Castlehume Lough and Lower Lough Erne. A fresh-faced Rory McIlroy would in fact be the resort's first touring pro, and the Lough Erne logo would adorn his Oakley polo shirt when he won his first major at the US Open at Congressional in 2011. The resort's opening in 2009 would see an exhibition match between McIlroy and Harrington, with many of the great and good of Northern Irish society in attendance. I remember particularly a tipsy Jimmy Nesbitt on the final green as MC, and indeed my aforementioned colleague Johnny Packham being completely oblivious as to who Arlene Foster, the then Minister for Enterprise and Investment and subsequent First Minister, was. What are your recollections of the Lough Erne project?
Well, I do go back to the beginning of that project in the sense that I was at a meeting with Jim Tracy and one of his business partners at the Kempinski Hotel in Marbella back in the, I believe, the very early 2000s. He had a dream. Jim was a visionary who had a dream of creating a spectacular golf course on what he described as an amazing piece of land in County Fermanagh at Lough Erne. I had been contacted by his business partner who had connections in golf, contacted me because they were interested in discussing the possibility of Lough Erne being a Faldo Design project, and Faldo Design the golf course. So I happened to be in Spain at a week when Jim and his business partner were in Spain. We met. I was shown images of the site, which straight away I could see was well, potentially very spectacular. Lough Erne in anybody who knows Lough Erne in that area knows that it's pretty special. So it wasn't an area of Ireland I particularly knew at the time, but I could just see it was a very interesting site. And Jim was, as I've said, a visionary and had this incredible dream. Anyway, I then went and saw the site, and it was every bit as spectacular as the pictures suggested. But Jim didn't own all of the land at the time. It was like a lot of land in Ireland. There were various owners who had interests in it, and we certainly wanted to do the project. We wanted to help Jim secure the land, and that's why I say I was involved at the beginning. Certainly, when our golf architect saw it, when Nick Faldo first saw it, we were very keen on the project happening. And kind of long story short, the project did happen. Guy Hockley again was the architect on that project, and I think Lough Erne is, possibly due to its location, is underrated. I think it's an extremely good golf course, certainly one of the best that Faldo Design created. And it was sad that, as you mentioned, it opened in 2009, and the original owner lost the property following the 2008 crash. And fortunately, from I guess both the Faldo Design perspective, although I left Faldo Design in 2012, I know they still have a relationship with Lough Erne. the new owners of Loch Earn, and I, for different reasons, have a very good and strong relationship with Loch Earn. So Loch Earn, perhaps not quite to the extent of Ballyliffin, but Loch Earn has played a part in various parts of my life. And I'm not sure if you've been there, but I do think it's a very special place.
No, I have. Johnny Packham has dragged me kicking and screaming. Not quite kicking and screaming, but no, myself and Johnny played the day after the opening, and I played once or twice subsequent to that, and always a great day out. As a links junkie, I would certainly give it the thumbs up in terms of, if you haven't played it, you have to have it on your list. It's some great topographical change. There's a couple of distinct and different areas to the golf course. Obviously lakeside, some higher ground, so that par 5 that sort of cascades over the top of the hill, and then the short par 4 down to, relatively short par 4. It was 370, which McIlroy flew all the way to the green, if memory serves, during the official opening. But certainly would wholeheartedly endorse anybody's decision to put Loch Earn on their either inbound itinerary or staycation itinerary, 100%. Maybe we can look at a project that didn't quite get off the ground. Now, I will include a link in the show notes to a Scratch TV piece that was done with Nick a number of years ago. But we might look at Bartra Island, which is an island located off the coast of County Mayo in Killala Bay. The island can in fact be seen from the vantage point of a number of the estuarine holes at Enniscrone. I understand that Nick owned the island circa 2003 to 2020 and was very keen to build a links golf course on the 1.9 square kilometre island. Unfortunately, it never materialised. However, it's a very interesting story that perhaps you can give us a brief introduction to.
Yeah. I guess with running any golf course design company, you remember the ones that got away or didn't happen, every bit as much as the ones that did happen. Because for every great potential project, there's probably 2 or 3 that for various reasons didn't happen or didn't finally open. In 2008, of course, I think the results of 2008 and what happened to the golf course design industry probably greatly influenced the fact that I didn't continue beyond 2012 in that. The world of golf kind of was changed after 2008. And that also played a role in, I've mentioned in Loch Earn, obviously, but it also played a role in Bartra. So Bartra was a site that goes back to 1997, the island, the year I started working with Following the Design. We were shown images of this site in as you rightly say, in Killala Bay in County Mayo, which was an island of duneland. And the idea of creating a links course on an island, and a links course with some extraordinary dunes and vistas. You mentioned Enniscrone. You can see the island, or part of the island, from Enniscrone. That part of Enniscrone that is very spectacular. Enniscrone, there's some wonderful golf holes, as I'm sure you're familiar with, in the dunes at Enniscrone. And you look out and you can see Bartra Island. The idea of, if you like, taking the best of Enniscrone and having that experience on an island with 360-degree views was just, a dream golf course. And I know Nick Faldo, who's been on that island many times. You're right, he wasn't the owner, he was a co-owner, 50-50 situation with an Irish consortium. There was a UK-based consortium of which Nick Faldo headed up, if you like, and an Irish consortium that owned the island. There was a long history as to how that island became owned. Nick fell in love with it, having seen it, was introduced it by somebody who didn't end up being the owner. It was very complicated. It has a very complicated background as to how Nick did acquire the island, which would take me 3 podcasts to explain. He ended up co-owning it. His dream, and to some extent the dream of the co-owners, was to create this extraordinary island links golf course. Now, I think the main reason it didn't happen, apart from, there are a number of reasons, but maybe the main reason is that the UK ownership and the Irish ownership couldn't quite agree on how to take the project forward and how much this was going to be a pure golf course as opposed to part of a development, should we say. The sides couldn't agree. The principal co-owner on the Irish side, unfortunately, died suddenly, and that threw everything into disarray. 2008 came along, so the plans didn't happen. But I think, as you well know, whether it could actually have got built with the fact that it was most of the island was subject to a special area of conservation order, the challenges in building a links course on that not totally pristine duneland. Our view was always that by actually managing that system, we could create a better SAC, if you like. There would have been restrictions on how the golf course was built. I think that's true. I'm not totally sure how. I know my understanding is that Bartra has now been bought by somebody else, so it was obviously found to be impossible to take any kind of golf development forward. I don't know who now owns it. I do know I believe it would have made an incredible golf course, but a challenging one to create, because again, not just because of the likely restrictions that the environmentalists would have put on it, but also the fact that it was on an island and how to access it would have been a challenge. But if had it happened to have Enniscrone, Bartra Island and Carn in and Ross's Point not that far away, I think that would have taken golf in the northwest of Ireland to another level.
Strand Hill, we get very, very
Strand Hill. I know Strand Hill, very, very good golf course as well. Absolutely, the underrated links course. But it would have had. I mean, the northwest of Ireland has got a lot to shout about anyway, because the courses I've just mentioned, and then further up, of course, is Donegal, with all that's been happening there from Ballyliffin to Rosapenna, etc., and Merthyr and Port Salon, you name it. It's northwest of Ireland has got an awful lot. Bartra could have added a pretty special dimension to it. So it, along with a few others, are in that bracket of the ones that got away, and fortunately there were a few that we were able to accomplish.
Sure, I think it's probably useful just to for our international listeners that probably don't quite know the European environmental legislative situation quite as well as perhaps yourself and myself, our rudimentary knowledge of it anyway, Nick. It's probably useful just to mention the SAC, which differs from the UK designation of SSSI, I believe, and in fact one of the reasons why the UK historically has been able to develop the likes of Dundonald and Trump's Place up in Aberdeen, because they actually got a derogation from the SAC regulations or directives, if you like, from Europe when you were in Europe. But it's probably useful to, I guess, counterpoint the Bartra project perhaps with Inchstrand, which is in County Kerry. So one of the best, as yet undeveloped potential duneland sites for golf in Ireland can be found at Inchstrand in County Kerry. And for many years, the brother of the former Deputy Prime Minister, a guy called Arthur Spring, who was a golf course architect in his own right, endeavoured to gain permission to develop the Inchstrand site into a golf course. It's located between Killarney and Duke's Golf Club, if people know the Kerry geography. I believe actually, so wonderful is the site, and it was actually historically the site of a former golf club, I believe, or golf course. I believe that Bandon Dunes developer Mike Kaiser was involved in some stage, alas due to that aforementioned special area of conservation, which is essentially a preservation order, if you like, of that Macker Linksland environment, if you like, which is obviously pretty much unique to Ireland and the UK. Well, obviously a little bit in Denmark, a little bit in the Netherlands. That's about it. Maybe a little bit in Belgium as well. But I guess just going back to SAC anyway, and Inchstrand, Obviously, due to the SAC environmental designation, the plans never gained widespread traction, despite the main protagonist being well got and well connected in political terms. I understand, as I said, that Bartra also held one of these special areas of conservation designations, both for the dunes and actually, I think it was a location for breeding seabird. Obviously, the SAC designation, while not completely precluding the possibility of development, basically puts a hell of a lot of roadblocks in place of any likely developments. So I guess it's unfortunate, and these things happen, I'm sure, as potential golf course builders, that you if you throw enough stuff at the wall, something is going to stick, but some of it just doesn't stick. I think with the SAC designation, it was probably unlikely that Bartra would have got the go ahead. I guess we're never going to know, but I think another one of the issues was access was a bit of an issue. Is that right, in terms of how you actually get paying guests and staff members and the team actually on the island?
No, that's right. But I think we had potential solution to accessing the island. So, and I think the SACs would have been extremely the SAC would have been extremely difficult to get around. But one of the exceptions, that's not the right answer, but if you address, it's a matter of public interest and things like employment come into it. I'm not saying there are ways around it. There are ways of maybe working with it, but at the end of the day, we didn't get that far down the route. So I don't know whether ultimately a golf course that we'd be happy with could have got built on that island, and I don't think we'll ever know.
Two final questions just in relation to the Following the Design gig.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've alluded to it previously in relation to that wow factor, but a great site is obviously always preferable to a not so great site. What site or sites jumped off the page to you in terms of on first view in relation to the sites you worked on with Following the Design?
I suppose some of the sites we either worked on initially, project couldn't get completed for whatever reason. There's probably more of those than sites that did get completed. So, I mean, we mentioned, Bartra Island is obviously is probably top of that list. But then there was an incredible links site with black sand in Iceland that we were hopeful of being able to create a totally unique golf course, a links course with black sand in Iceland. Might have put the photos and links in the shade. It was owned by an Icelandic bank, and if you remember what happened in 2008, you'll understand why that didn't go forward.
The arse fell out of the Iceland economy, and any of
the first one to go.
Primary and secondary bondholders were burned.
It sounds like you were one of them.
No, I wasn't, but no, a memory like an elephant.
There you go. Anyway, that killed that project. But maybe in another life, that's a project I would love to reactivate. Imagine amazing golf with the Northern Lights element to it. So that's what the Foton is, I suppose you could say. But this was Linksland. Anyway, Iceland, there was an incredible site. I remember in South Africa, Uruguay, there was a piece of land that was like, you could have been on the Melbourne Sand Belt in Uruguay. I remember we had a project close to Rio de Janeiro. These are ones that ultimately didn't happen. But, all around the world, we looked at some pretty incredible sites. But we were fortunate to finish golf course projects in all 6 continents. So wow factor, I do think Loch Erin has a huge wow factor. There's a project we did in Denmark that doesn't seem to get perhaps the credit it should, called Ledreborg Palace, that's on a pretty exceptional piece of land. In America, I know we did a project called Cottonwood Hills, which is quite close to prairie dunes, similar terrain to prairie dunes, so very sandy site. In the US, a wow factor, certainly the site at Shadow Ridge, which was a Marriott project, Marriott USA project. Nick Faldo had a relationship with Marriott Golf Institutes, the Faldo Golf Institute by Marriott, which was very successful. and that led to 2 golf projects, one in Palm Desert and one near Phoenix, sort of, well, desert courses. And if you've ever been to Palm Springs, the backdrops there of the mountains is pretty exceptional. So that course certainly has wow factor. We finished one in the Dominican Republic as well. Roco Key it was called. I'm not sure how the project is financially, but it opened, and that golf course had a golf hole that was, I believe, as spectacular as the 16th at Cypress Point, or a couple of the ones in is it Cabot? What is it, in the tip of the Baja Peninsula in Mexico? There's some stunning golf holes around the world that on promontories that jut out into the ocean, taking the 7th at Pebble Beach to a more dramatic level, if you like. Anyway, Roco Key in the Dominican Republic has a golf hole and several spectacular golf holes. There's one I should mention in Vietnam that I think has got a lot of wow factor. It's called Laguna Lanco, which was the architect who worked with Nick Faldo on that. Very good. Another very good friend called Paul Jansen, brilliant architect who created a course with a number of different environments, again with a dramatic backdrop and right alongside the ocean, called Laguna Lanco. You look that one up, that's got plenty of wow factor.
You know, absolutely. And look, the client obviously pays the bills. However, I'm sure some are easier to deal with than others. What client, if there's one client out there that stands out in terms of being perhaps low maintenance and maybe even verging on knowing what they don't know?
Knowing what they don't know is important. In other words, that trusting you with the project. Not always easy, because especially if it's an individual who has a dream, like a Jim Tracy or the owner of 13th Beach, who was quite personally involved, had his own ideas, but as the architect and designer of the golf course, you want to have as much freedom as you can, whilst respecting the vision of the founder or the owner of the course. I suppose the client that was most easy to deal with and incredibly professional were Marriott Golf. I told you we did 2 projects in the US with Marriott Golf. They just a bit like Troon Golf are now, in my opinion, extremely well organized and very professional in what they do. And they were not only easy to work with as a client, but their input was they knew what input they could provide, and they knew what input you could provide, and they seemed to be very good at knowing the difference. So they stand out as clients, and I would just say, in terms of the architects, when we partnered with a different firm to create a project, it was obviously really important that they could share a vision with Faldo Design, and particularly with Nick Faldo, as to what they were creating. And Steve Smyers and Brian Curley, and then when Paul Jansen went on his own, were great people to work with as architects. I mean, I'll fly a flag for them, if you like, because I think they do great work, and were very easy, come very just positive vibes to work with.
Yeah, look, we're getting up to recent times. You alluded to the fact that you went on a trip to the Himalayas when you finished up with Faldo Design, which I believe was a Macmillan Cancer Trust fundraising trip.
Yeah.
Perhaps you can tell us what transpired post-trip, and the adventures you have been on, both with your own health and obviously the quest that you have been on for the greater part of the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, sure. Well, I as we've discussed, I spent 15 years with Following the Design, and it was literally to the day, May the 1st, 2012, that I felt I wanted a fresh challenge. And also, I felt that the golf course design world, especially if you work with a big name, was heading in a different and difficult direction. And the number of new golf courses with a signature player that's designed has dropped dramatically since 2008. But I think more than that, more than the fact that I felt it was a difficult business to be in going forward, I wanted a fresh challenge. And 15 years literally to the day seemed a very good number. And so, but I wasn't sure. I was in my early 50s then, and I wanted this one more challenge in golf, if you like, but I wasn't sure what it was going to be. And whilst I was deliberating, if you like, I went on a trek in the Himalayas, as you mentioned, organised by Macmillan Cancer Support, which are a wonderful UK-based charity. Macmillan nurses are famous the world over. There were 50 people in the Himalayas, all walking, raising funds. Half the people didn't have a cancer connection, including me. Nobody in my close family had cancer, and I certainly hadn't had cancer. But the other half of the people were walking for a cause, and it was a very inspirational trek. I happened to meet the head of fundraising for Macmillan on the walk, who was interested. It was a golfer. She was interested in my golf background, and I was interested in what Macmillan did increasingly. As a result of that trip, anyway, I promised the lady at Macmillan, look, if I can find a way to link my golf contacts with what you do in fighting cancer, I'll try and come back to you with an idea. And a few months go by, as it were, and I kept thinking Macmillan talk a lot about the number 4, about how there are 4 million people in the UK at the moment living with cancer, and 4 stages of cancer. And well, I knew that 4 was a big number in golf for lots of reasons, whether it's 4 hole, 4 thumbs, 4 major championships, even shouting 4 when you lose your ball. So I just thought if I could use this number 4 in connection with some kind of means to fight cancer. And so anyway, I came up with the idea thinking there are 2,500 golf courses in the UK, all with a 4th hole. How about we create a message on the flag, a message like Golf for Macmillan or something like that? And to me, a flag seems such a good method of communication, because if you think of all the sports in the world, golf is by far the one most capable of flying the flag for a cause. Flags tend to be around the periphery of a sporting arena, whereas with golf, you stand on the tee and very importantly, it's your goal, it's your target, and you interact with the flag. So I thought if we could put a message on the flag, that would be a great start. And to cut a long story short, Macmillan liked the idea very much. I didn't go forward with it at the time because I really questioned whether I was a good or an appropriate campaigner not having had cancer. I could just imagine sitting down with a golf club and understandably them thinking, well, kind of why are you pushing this idea of a special 4 on a flag? You've not had cancer. So anyway, then I went down with my first cancer. As a result of that, the period where I was recovering, a number of people had said, what a great idea, this idea of a 4 on a flag with the cancer message, but why just do it in the UK? And well, of course, the answer was because of how it had started, this idea. But there might be 2,500 golf courses in the UK, but of course, there are 36,000 golf courses around the world, and they're not just 2 or 3 million golfers; there are 60 million golfers. And well, if 1 in 4 of them is affected by cancer, that's a potentially huge audience that you might want to engage with. And so, as I'm recovering, this idea of global golf for cancer emerged, and that's the message that goes on the 4th hole of a number of golf courses, increasingly a number of golf courses around the world. It's golf is such a global sport. Cancer, sadly, is such a global disease. Global golf for cancer makes sense. A golf course flying the flag for a cause makes sense. And so the last 5 years I've spent building this campaign to get the goal. Essentially, the goal of the campaign, if you get it down to its essence, is to get the golf community doing more to help fight cancer, and in all its forms. As I say, I mean, it's not just a question of fighting, say, breast cancer or supporting cancer research. It's about, there's so many forms of cancer. I've now had cancer 4 times as this campaign has developed. My form of cancer is it's not that well known. It's called head and neck cancer. But the idea of the campaign is to support all of those people. I always say the flag flies in honor of anyone who's battling cancer, but it's also flying in support of all those organizations that are fighting cancer. And that can mean fighting breast cancer, fighting childhood cancer, helping support the same, support those fighting brain cancer. And that, well, that's led to a further association with the Sevi Foundation. Sevi, of course, sadly dying of brain cancer, but it's about cancer. It's about fighting cancer in all its forms and all around the world. And so golf, fortunately, being a global sport, there are iconic golf courses around the world. And if you're trying to build a golfing story, to be able to fly your flag for your story at some of the most iconic courses in the world is a great way of getting the golf community to engage. So to cut a very long story short, what a goal of the campaign is by this time next year, 400 of the most iconic courses around the world on all the 6 continents will be flying this flag on special occasions, special dates for flying the flag for cancer fighters worldwide. And that includes, for instance, all 14 open courses that stage the Open Championship, and some, whether it's the Rio Olympic course, Durban Country Club, I'm just throwing names out. The flag is thrown at Pebble Beach and at Pinehurst. Some iconic courses that help develop the story, and certainly getting the golfing community engaged. There's so many things that the golfing community can do to fight cancer. And it's not just flying at golf clubs, it's now increasingly flying during golf events. The Euro Pro Tour, for instance, this year flying the flag on their 4th hole at every event. So it's increasing awareness, and the purpose of the campaign is ultimately to become significant in fundraising, but you don't get to the fundraising unless you've created a strong story and platform. And in a way, that's where I am with the campaign at the moment, building the platform, building the awareness, so that we have something very substantial, if you like, at substantial places or significant places and events that can act as this catalyst for fundraising, doing various events around the world.
Well, I'm pleased to report that our Captain's Day at Royal Dublin was recently, actually last Saturday week, and lo and behold, the Global Golf for Cancer flag was flying on the 4th, very proudly flapping in the breeze as I think I made a bogey. It wasn't a great day. It was a great day, but it wasn't a great score. Let's put it that way. But maybe just to bring you back to where it all started from a launch perspective, I believe that was March 2017, and you launched the Global Golf for Cancer initiative with an epic 2,000 kilometre walk along the Atlantic coast of Ireland, utilising the Wild Atlantic Way. Playing the 4th hole at the 40 courses you passed along the route, and then flying the Global Golf for Cancer flag, obviously, at the 4th hole. Your walk started at Ballyliffin, no surprise there, in County Donegal, and finished at Old Head in County Cork. You've since been back to extend your reach around the north and east coast of the island. Jesus, a 2,000 kilometre walk for starters. You don't do things by half.
No, well, I wanted an impactful launch. As I say, I think I alluded to this. I do believe that stories create the awareness, and the awareness leads to action and support. That's one of my mantras. To launch in an impactful way, sure, I suppose I didn't have to walk 2,000 kilometers with a golf bag on my back. The idea did start that I would visit 40 golf clubs and on the wonderful west coast of Ireland, present them with a flag. And then one day I woke up with this idea of walking towards the flag. And so, as somebody who hadn't done much walking before, the idea of doing 2,000 kilometers was a bit daunting. But it took 4 months. I did it in 2 stages, so 1,000 kilometers. Actually, I know you said it started in Ballyliffin. That was the first golf club to fly the flag, but the walk had to start at Malin Head.
Beg your pardon, just up the road.
Just up the road. So it was Malin Head to Old Head. So the length of Ireland via, as you say, 2,000 kilometers of the Wild Atlantic Way, which because of the coast of Ireland is not exactly a straight line, should we say. That's why it was 2,000 kilometers. I paused in the summer because my first cancer situation, indeed, I've mentioned I've had cancer 4 times, head and neck cancer 4 times. It's all related to sun damage. So to go further on that, being a fair-skinned person who didn't like much of my generation, cover up with proper sun protection. My top of my head basically got a lot of damage when I was young. It was late. It didn't appear until my 50s. But anyway, I got my first head and neck cancer, as I say. I didn't want to walk in the summer of 2017. So I was going to complete the walk, the second 1,000 kilometers, autumn 2017, get to Old Head. I didn't do it until the spring because I had my second more serious bout of cancer, which cost me a completely new scalp in autumn of 2017. But I did finish the walk in spring 2018. And I decided during that walk how I was going to develop ideas for developing this campaign to make it global. And I thought, well, I will do 4 walks to launch it. So, of course, the next walk had to be at the so-called home of golf. So I walked from Turnberry to Dornoch via St Andrews, and that enabled doing the same thing, playing the 4th hole, carrying my golf clubs. That did enable me to visit all the Open Championship courses in Scotland. Subsequently, I have visited them all, as I say, in the rest of the UK and Ireland. I then did a 3rd walk around Northern Ireland, actually specifically because the Open Championship was returning to Northern Ireland at Portrush. So in 2019, I went from Lough Erne, which we've mentioned before, headed up towards the coast and went along the wonderful Causeway Coast, which included Royal Portrush and Port Stewart and Castle Rock. And I finished an iconic 4th hole, again, all about stories. So to play the 4th hole at Royal County Down and finish the walk there was very special. 4th walk, because of COVID, only happened last November, December, and that was along the Camino in northern Spain. But whilst doing these 4 walks and actually battling with cancer 4 times, because the 4th cancer occurred in summer 2019, which unfortunately cost me my left eyesight. But in addition to completing the walks, I made it a goal to get the flag on every continent by the end of 2019, which I managed to do by getting to South America and Australia towards the end of 2019. I'm glad I did it, particularly given that COVID came along in 2020. So I'm glad I had the courage and bloody mindedness to not let losing my eyesight in summer 19 put the campaign on hold. I did go to South America, to Rio, to Buenos Aires, to Santiago, to Montevideo, and then flying the flag at four great courses in each country. And then getting to Australia just to initially introduce the campaign. So I visited Royal Melbourne, Kingston Heath, and then 2 extraordinary places in Tasmania around the time of the President's Cup. So I got back Christmas 19, and then, of course, along came COVID, but that enabled me to develop the course in the UK. That was the only place I could do it because I couldn't even fly to Ireland until 2021. But I have picked the campaign up again towards the end of 2021. I went to Canada in 2021 and then did the Camino walk. And this year I've been to places, flown the flag in Dubai and Abu Dhabi in the Middle East. I've visited, as we've said, the Netherlands and Norway. I've been twice to America. So I'm traveling again, flying the flag again. But it's about growing this campaign, as I say, and fundamentally it's getting the golf community to support cancer fighters worldwide, and hopefully it's achieving that.
You're a bloody force of nature, so you're. In thinking about that particular part of your story, I just kept coming back to Sir Ian Botham, actually, who's obviously a serial walker for charity as well and has been for many decades. I'm wondering if Beefy's walks at all influenced or inspired you to initially embark on your own walking odyssey, or is that just coincidence?
Well, I will say Beefy didn't have a set of golf clubs on his back. I think
he's carrying a few extra pounds though. Let's be fair.
Oh, well,
I believe he enjoys an odd bottle of claret.
Yeah, no, what he's through his walks is phenomenal. I don't think. I mean, cricket. I was 19 years old, I think, in 1980 or was it 81 when he destroyed the Australians at cricket. I'm not a massive cricket fan, but he was a national hero, but what he's done subsequently is phenomenal too. I don't think cricket not being my sport and walking, as I say, was something I'd not really thought about until for some reason I woke up with this idea of walking around Ireland with my golf bag was something I'd not thought about. So I did. If he did influence what I did, it was coincidence. Yeah.
Okay. Just interested to know how clubs and individuals can reach out to you if they want to sign up for the Global Golf for Cancer Initiative.
Yeah, I mean, I always say to golf clubs, the important thing is you don't have to fly the flag literally. I mean, of course, I want as many golf clubs ultimately to be flying the flag on special dates and occasions, and importantly during special events and getting the tours involved, and so that this flag or this logo, Global Golf for Cancer, becomes very, very well known. Then certainly I do see the campaign as engaging various organisations to capitalise on fundraising opportunities. That's not my skill, and I think it's important to know what you can and can't do. Having said that, I am a great believer in less is more. So I don't want to. I like a few select ideas that we want to develop that can actually really make an impact. Getting Global Golf for Cancer well known is through powerful stories is, I suppose, what I'm seeking to do. So go back to your question again, if you don't mind. It was about how can clubs reach out? Well, as I've said, whatever golf clubs do, if the golfers who play there encouraged more to help fight cancer, and that's not just about making donations. And by the way, if people donate to Global Golf for Cancer, 100% of that money is going to go to cancer fighting causes around the world. Okay. Obviously, if a golf club says, "Oh, we want to hold a golf day, we'd love to fly the flag, but we want to the money to go to a local hospice or whatever that's fighting cancer," then that's fine. It's not for me to tell them who to donate to. If they want to donate to Global Golf for Cancer, as I say, they can be assured that it's going to help fight cancer all around the world. But if they have a special relationship with a cancer charity, I say you can fly the flag and support that local cancer charity. I think one of the reasons Global Golf for Cancer works is that this flag doesn't fly. We, not being specifically a charity, we're a campaign. Campaign obviously with a charitable cause, but we're not a charity, and therefore, if a club says, "Well, we support this charity and that charity," I say, "Great, you can still fly the flag and support your whatever charity you choose." It doesn't compete; it hopefully complements, and I think that's the difference. So no club could actually say, "Well, we don't want to support Global Golf Cancer because we support something else." Global Golf Cancer is not in competition. It's just saying, golf community, do more. If a result of our campaign, somebody hears about the campaign and goes and visit, I often say this, and goes and visit their aunt or grandmother, whatever, who's had a cancer diagnosis, wow, it's doing something really, really positive. And you can't actually quantify that in terms of money. What I do know is there are 60 million golfers around the world, and if every golfer makes €1, not necessarily in cash contribution, but in helping fight cancer in so many different ways, it's making a massive difference, and that's what it's about.
Yeah, and I guess just before we move on from this to the last two questions, for fellow fair-skinned, fair-haired people out there, remember it's summertime in the Northern Hemisphere. Slip, slop, slap, stay in the shade, don't expose yourself to sunburn. You should be able to stay away from melanomas, hopefully.
Well, yeah, your skin cancer is... My cancer is not skin cancer, but it is caused by sun damage.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely what you're saying. Cover up.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And it's Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, where, in fact, even on days, frankly, when the sun isn't out.
Even during the winter as well. I mean, UV can still get you during the winter as well, even in these northern climes.
True, absolutely.
Nick, as all regular listeners will know, I always finish the same two final questions. The first one relates to golfing bucket lists. It's completely up to you how you interpret this particular question. You might let us know where your 5 bucket list courses or locations are and why you've chosen them. As I said, you can be, your list can be approximately 5. There is some flexibility there. So whatever you wish to do with this particular question, the floor is yours.
Okay. All right. Well, I suppose there's no way I'd name 5, as you know, I would have to pick 4. 4 being my number.
4's fine, or 8 if you want.
Global golf for cancer. Now, everything about me is 4. I often sort of joke to people I sleep in a 4-poster bed, and everything is kind of 4. So let me see. I mean, 4 in terms of courses I've not visited. I've been incredibly fortunate to visit so many of the great courses in the world, whether it's through golf writing, working with Felder Design, or indeed Global Golf for Cancer, where our flag has flown at some very, very special places. If I take 4 places, that I haven't visited, so having been fortunate to visit so many, of the world's top 20, perhaps Fisher's Island is the one that I would really love to go and visit that I haven't visited. That may apply to the top 50 courses. Fisher's Island, I've heard so much about it, but I've never been there. So, and apparently the 4th hole is incredible. So that would be one. Of course, being somebody interested in golf course design and architecture, I've heard about Tara ET in New Zealand. I would have to put that on my bucket list, my personal bucket list of places I've never been to. So Fisher's Island, Tara ET. One of my favourite golf courses in the UK, talk about unique golf courses, Westwood Ho in North Devon. I don't remember I'm from Devon. Westwood Ho, it's the only royal golf course in the world, Royal North Devon, where you can stand on the first tee and a sheep comes up and bleats at you. Okay, there are sheep, there are cows roaming around, there are electric fences around the greens. It's also an incredibly historic golf course for lots of reasons. Anyway, Westwood Ho is a special golf course in the UK I've been to. There's a place called Eastwood Ho. I believe it's around Cape Cod, not that far from Boston, where the US Open was finished wonderfully yesterday. Eastwood Ho, designed by Herbert Fowler, who created Walton Heath. So I know the architecture is going to be extremely interesting. It's also just looks a spectacular setting in a part of the world I would like to know more. So I've got you 3: Fisher's Island, Tara ET, Eastwood Ho, and I'm going to throw in Jasper, which I know I'm going to visit. 3 hours drive by car from Banff.
She's in Canada, yeah.
Jasper and Banff.
Is that Danny Thompson?
It's supposed to be better than Banff. A lot of people say it's better than Banff Springs, which is, I have been fortunate to go there. It's an incredible part of the world, the Rockies of Canada. It's a Stanley Thompson, absolutely, very highly regarded. So that's my 4th that I haven't been to. Of those I have been to, if I could pick 4, I'm going to say, to be current, the Photon Links would have to be on that list of extraordinary places that I would recommend others visit if they can. Mm-hmm. Hard to get to, expensive to get to, but otherworldly.
Just out of interest, just a quick question on that. Am I right in saying once you get off whatever the last aeroplane that you get off, it's about a 3-hour drive?
Yeah, I believe there is an airport, but if you've got a lot of time, that you can fly to within 45 minutes, but it must be a flight that goes once a week or something. Normal travel from the UK or from Ireland, you'd have to fly to Oslo, but from Oslo it's a 2-hour flight north into the Arctic Circle, just about, and then a 3-hour drive. Correct. So it's
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and be warned, renting a car and the cost of everything in Norway is expensive to most of the world, but yeah, mind blowing. The other one at the other end of the planet, Cape Wickham in Tasmania, which I was fortunate to visit and fly the flag at back in December 2019. 18 stunning setting, 18 very, very well designed golf holes. An iconic lighthouse, I believe the tallest in the Southern Hemisphere, dominates the surroundings, but definitely one of the best golf courses I've ever played that not that many people know about. So as a bucket list, the Photon Links, Cape Wickham, and then I'm going to pick 2 more that I would put on a bucket list if you've not been there, and for very different reasons. First, I'm going to say Old Head Links in Ireland. It means a lot to me. It's where I finished my golf walk, and the 4th hole has another lighthouse right behind it. So to finish my walk there, let me tell you, the fourth hole is the most spectacular hole in terms of being on 200-foot cliffs. What I say about that hole and that golf course is, yeah, it may not, it may not be the best piece of land to have created the most beautiful golf course, but if you want spectacular with a on steroids, to me, it's the only golf course in the world I've and the fourth tee actually encapsulated, where you stand on the tee and your jaw drops in the way it drops if you go to the Grand Canyon for the first time. You just go, wow, that's just it's mind blowing. You have to see it to understand it fully, how powerful it is. So Old Head, and the other one I'm going to say is very different. Royal Dornoch. I'm fortunate to be a member at Royal Dornoch, very fortunate to be a member there, because to me it's absolutely golf as it should be, and golf at its most enjoyable for so many reasons. It's an incredibly welcoming golf club. It's a place where I always say if you wear a watch, take it off and throw it away, because time doesn't matter in Dornoch. The golf course has the most incredible, seamless flow around. Wonderful green sites, the whole golf experience at Dornoch is very special. I once said of Dornoch, it should have 4 letters in front of Dornoch. I'll tell you what they are in a second, but it's because if ever you meet people around the world in Dornoch, people always have you just mention the word Dornoch and people go, it just has that incredibly positive feeling to it, and they should put triple AH before the word Dornoch, because Dornoch, you can barely say Dornoch on its own. It is to me, it's that special. So they're my 4 that I visited and would recommend are on other people's bucket lists: Lofoten, Cape Wickham, Old Head, and Royal Dornoch. They're not private, so you can play. I mean, obviously some are more expensive than others, and some are definitely more difficult to get to than others. None of them are easy to get to, but then that's part of the journey, isn't it? Part of the experience.
Most certainly. Look, finally, we're on to the book recommendations. I know you're a big P.G. Wodehouse fan, and obviously as a long-time reader of golf books, I'm interested to know what 2 books you would recommend to our listeners to augment any golfing library.
Well, P.G. Wodehouse, absolutely. There are 2 books that inspired me to along with Seve and his 1976 exploits at Royal Birkdale. If there are 2 books that inspired me to get more into golf, one would be The World Atlas of Golf, which, as somebody who loves exotic places around the world and travel, The World Atlas of Golf showed me as this teenager that golf was global, and that there were places like the Jockey Club in Buenos Aires and Royal Melbourne, but then also golf in some very far off places all around the world. To me, that was very exciting, and the book, of course, is wonderful in so many ways. World Atlas of Golf as an informative, interesting book about golf around the world. And then the second book would have to be comedy. And yes, P.G. Wodehouse, you mentioned. I read a collection of his stories when I was, 14, 15, and I'm almost still laughing. I just thought they were so funny. And to me, a good book is about getting you a sense of place, a sense of time, that you can almost you can almost feel you're there in a dreamlike way. And P.G. Wodehouse is the oldest member, sitting under the tree, recounting these extraordinary stories in such a funny way. That would be my other book. Any book that has a collection of stories by P.G. Wodehouse on golf.
You're happy out as long as that's the criteria. Excellent. Before we conclude, Nick, you might share with listeners how they can learn more about the Global Golf for Cancer campaign, and how they might be able to reach out to you via social media, or indeed any other channels that you might be available through.
Sure. I think the simple answer to that is our website. So Global Golf for globalgolf4cancer.org. That's how you can find out more about Global Golf for Cancer, and indeed how to contact me. Social media, I would love any listener to this podcast to follow me on either Twitter or on Instagram, and that's at GG4Cancer.
Excellent. Well, look, Nick Edmund, it is always a great pleasure to speak to you, and this occasion was no different. Your indefatigable, never give up attitude is so inspirational. Golf is in the headlines for arguably some of the wrong reasons of late. Your story is one of giving back. With this in mind, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you on behalf of the global fraternity of golf for all that you continue to do in raising much needed awareness and ultimately funding to the benefit of cancer research. And let's hope 4 times remains a charm. Keep fighting the good fight. I look forward to taking you up on that very gracious invitation to join you at Royal Dornoch someday. Go easy.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you, Shane.
Many thanks for tuning in. As usual, you can find us online at firmandfast.golf or on Twitter at firmandfastgolf. Please continue to like, subscribe and comment. It really is appreciated. Until the next time, happy golfing.